Ugh.
Yay. Okay, so I am excited to be talking with Karli Jackson. You may know her from her lifestyle and nutrition focused YouTube channel called Naturally Karli. That's where I discovered her. Karli is a holistic nutrition and weight loss coach with an extensive background in plant-based nutrition, human psychology, and behavior modification techniques, which you know that I love as well. So I think that's why we connect so well. She specializes in helping ill and overweight individuals really regain their health through dietary and lifestyle interventions, emphasizing whole food, plant-centered nutrition, which I love. And I thought that today, there's lots of things I could have talked to Karli about, but I thought today I would pick her brain about a topic that she covers a lot and that I know my audience is also keenly interested in, and that is sugar. Dun, dun, dun. So I pulled my amazing Facebook group called Conquer the Food Fight. I'll put the link to that in the description below. Come join us if you're not a member yet. And I told them that I was having this chat with Karli about sugar on the channel. And I asked them to share any questions they had about sugar. So they had tons. So I went through them all and I just kind of whittled it down to ones that seemed to repeat a lot in different words. And I thought we would dive into those together. So thank you for being here, Karli. I'm excited to talk to you about all things sugar.
Oh my goodness. I'm so glad you reached out. I'm really happy to be here as well.
Yeah, this is a topic I think we both feel strongly about. And
Absolutely.
yeah, and I'm excited to get your take on it because I know it's something you talk about specifically a lot. So let's just dive right in because we got some good questions and that's going to be the best way to come at this, I think. So the first question was from Vera. And she just asked simply, is sugar really addictive? And I think this is such a good one because I think people are confused. Like the word addiction is very loaded. And, I have been very open about saying that, no, I think sugar is absolutely an addiction, just like any other addictive substance. But I've also gotten some flack from the quote unquote addiction community. So I would love to get your take on the idea of, is sugar really addictive?
This is a great place to start because, yes, addictive is a very loaded word, and people tend to get pretty sensitive around this topic, just in food addiction in general. But it is, in fact, a real thing, and they are in the process of putting it in the DSM. So it's not so much food in and of itself as these hyper palatable artificial foods that we have created since the industrialized revolution, which used to serve us in times of war and famine, and now not so much.
Yeah.
We are not designed for these substances, and that's in fact what they are, substances. So let's just start by classifying what exactly makes something addictive, right? So that would be things like withdrawal symptoms. When people try to get off sugar, they will experience severe withdrawal symptoms, particularly those cravings, but also things like mood alterations, irritability, anxiety, insomnia. Nobody wants to feel uncomfortable in their own skin. So the good news is this is temporary, but it is in fact a phenomenon that we need to recognize. But also there's a tolerance factor that many people don't realize. But when you start with that small little innocent looking bag of M&Ms and you're soon on the family size, and even though you have a family, you're not sharing it with your family, that would be called a tolerance, when you need more of what you used to need less of to get the same kind of hit or same kind of pleasurable experience. And then finally, this is a big one, continued use despite negative consequences. I know plenty of people that have had numerous trips to the dentist for their sugar addictions and are suffering from things like diabetes and hypertension and being overweight or having other kinds of heart disease complications, all stemming from this seemingly innocuous beginning of, oh, I have a little sweet tooth. So yes, that is definitely a component as well. But if we even look at the studies that are available, this is a very new science, but you can tell from the imaging studies that these substances light up the same exact pleasure pathways as things like cocaine and alcohol and other things that we do consider drugs, right? Like officially.
Yeah. Yeah.
But then there's the animal studies where the poor little rats are pressing that lever to get some more sugar as opposed to their cocaine. Like when the rats are choosing something over cocaine. That should be a big red flag. And yes, it is a lot of correlation and not causation when we're looking at those types of studies. And it's always difficult to kind of translate animal studies over to human studies or how that implicates in the human body. But we are surprisingly very similar on a DNA level to rats. But I also wanted to mention that when you think of sugar, like specifically, I know we're not talking like the isolated sugar, like nobody eats sugar out of the bag, but we always eat sugar inside of, its vessel, like the Snickers bar or
Lined with fat and salt and
Right, exactly. So when you're not eating, let's say the sugar beet, where most sugar probably comes from, at least in my country, that is perfectly harmless. If you're eating the whole beet, when you're getting the additional water and the fiber and all those natural built-in buffering mechanisms that are going to slowly allow your body to absorb and assimilate those, not just the nutrients, but the glucose. The glucose is what is triggering your dopamine pleasure center to either eat more of that substance or decide, oh, okay, I'm full now, or I've had as much pleasure as I need from that experience. It's if you are eating the sugar in and of itself, or you're eating it as a food that has plenty of that sugar in it as its main ingredients, then you are going to get this artificial feedback sensory mechanism that is telling you to eat more and more and more and more. So yes, sugar is really addictive.
Yeah. And I think that, again, I know obviously it's a loaded word, addiction and addictive, and people get caught up in that. But I think I've certainly experienced that in the people in my communities and my clients, they feel like they're addicted to sugar. Again, they might not, they're like, I don't know if I should use that word, but that's the experience, right? Because they want to stop, but they feel like they can't. And so I think that's why this word keeps coming up and why this question comes out, because it's like, we kind of know intuitively that it is because we feel it. We feel addicted to it.
And I think it's helpful to recognize that this is something outside of ourselves. So you don't need to be blaming yourself. You don't need to be feeling less competent or I have the logic, I have the knowledge. Why am I not carrying this out? Because this is working on our primitive reptilian brain mechanisms.
Yeah.
You cannot override those with logic. That's part of the executive function that has been created, just recently in human history, as opposed to, those more
limbic part of the brain. Yeah, right. Right. I talk about that a lot. Okay, good. All right, perfect. Let's move on to a question from Kim, who says, is there any way to get to a healthy point with sugar? I hate the idea of never being able to enjoy a birthday or special occasion. I can't handle the idea of completely giving up sugar forever. That seems like deprivation. And you probably hear this a lot, or some version of this. So I'm so curious to hear what your response is to this.
Yes, absolutely. Every one of my clients goes through.
Can we have just a little, Karli? Can I have just a bit?
And it is just that. It's a phase. It's very short-lived. Most people get over this in the first 4 weeks if they are super compliant.
Right. You mean like the withdrawal and all the cravings.
Right. So I think it's really interesting to look at the mindset here, because when we think that we need to associate things like sugar, drug-like foods with socializing, it really begs the question, why is that important to you? Why do you put that on a pedestal? Why do you associate those things? So instead of thinking about, oh, I'm going to a party, I get to go have some cake. Maybe we could think about, I'm going to bring this delicious bowl of fruit and I'm going to share it with everybody, and that's going to be my treat. Like, why can't we associate that with celebrating and socializing, as opposed to, well, I'm going to feel deprived if I don't get something sweet. It doesn't make sense. We wouldn't feel deprived if we weren't sharing a cigarette with somebody, or we wouldn't feel deprived if we weren't snorting a line of cocaine with somebody in the bathroom. Like, just because we see others doing it doesn't mean that we need to carry that out. Like, that's the craziest thing about this whole situation, is the fact that everybody else is doing it.
Yeah.
And we're trying to remind ourselves, this is not right. This is not right. This is
yeah. And I think the mindset, like you say, you can see the addiction in that mindset, because it's just like alcoholics have to come at it one day at a time, right? Like AA will tell you, you just take it one day at a time, because the idea of going your whole life without a drink again feels too much like deprivation. It's the same words that are being used here, right? Giving up sugar. The idea of not being able to have sugar anymore feels like deprivation. And that's I think the addiction speaking.
That's a great point. And I wanted to point that out as well, because the word deprivation is just another term for withdrawal. So if you
Yeah.
think about the fact that you're only feeling deprived because you're so used to exposing your brain to that substance. So as soon as you stop doing that, you no longer have feelings of deprivation. Now, when I go to a party, I couldn't be more proud of myself and how excited to be in my healthy body, as opposed to where I was when I was looking at those things as putting them on a pedestal and being my reward for going to this party and socializing.
Yeah.
It just doesn't make any sense.
Okay. Fantastic.
Yeah, but I also wanted to mention that it's important to associate these things with things like toxicity and illness and disease, as opposed to putting them on this pedestal and looking at them as a reward. Or, you know how some people have cheat days? That's super detrimental, because the whole week you're stuffing down your salad and your vegetables, like, oh, I can't wait to get to my my cheat day with my sweets and blah, blah, blah. So you're never really going to enjoy what you're eating, those naturally sweet foods, if you are always exposing yourself to these other things and having those thought patterns. So
Yeah.
I think that's a big one
Yeah.
to reassess.
Okay, Joan asks, how best to get over sugar cravings? I am okay for so long, and then the cravings cannot or will not be ignored. So what do you do? Like, what about once you get past that sort of few weeks of withdrawal, but then sometimes those things still crop up here and there?
There will be a spontaneous re-exposure. That's the way it is in all conditioning with our brain. If we stay away from something that we have previously learned and ingrained into our neural mechanisms, then it's going to no doubt try to peek its head every once in a while, like, hey, don't you remember me? Are you sure you want to give this up?
Yeah.
But it's so easy after those 4 weeks have passed to be like like, it's just a blimp on your radar. It's no longer like this obsessive, constant, repetitive, I should go get that. I know where it is. I know how much I want. I can sneak it in between this hour and this hour. It's just obnoxious. So yes, we definitely want to get away from that trap.
So
But
you're saying if people if that rears its head again, just kind of ride that wave, like just know that it will pass.
I feel that this question is more so going to be directed towards people who are still in that initial phase, because the cravings really only exist for the majority of the extreme cravings, the ones that you really have to come up with a strategy for. Those are only existing in the first, technically up to 3 weeks. But some people, it's really hard to get sugar completely out of your diet. But also, if you are ingesting things like any other chemicals, like the salt or the oil, those things are also going to perpetuate cravings for sweetness and other, these artificial foods in general. So if you're still eating potato chips and you're still going out and drinking your beer or having your coffee in the morning, these things are all going to promote these long-term cravings. So the sooner you can just clean it out, I know we're focusing on sugar, but let's just be real here. The sooner you can clean up your diet, the less you're going to be exposed to these problems. But to give people some practical tools, number one, we talked about abstinence, right? Just stop exposing yourself, period, for those up to 4 weeks, 3 to 4 weeks. And then when you move on from that neuroadaptation, you can start looking at other areas of your life, like the major pillars of health. Are you getting enough exercise? Are you getting enough sleep? Are you making sure you're hydrated? And social connectivity, surprisingly, and stress management, all of these things go into whether or not your nervous system is going to be able to handle these additional abundance of overriding stimuli that are calling you at every corner. So definitely want to have a good night's rest and be checking your meditation practice and all those good things and keeping up with your friends. So that's a good strategy. But also in the moment, right? These are long-term things. These are things that take a while to really solidify. But in the short term, you can do things like vigorous exercise, like some push-ups and go running, or just get out in nature. Those things have actually been shown. There's this wonderful book by John Rady called Spark. and it explains exactly what the neuronal mechanisms are in that particular tool. Or you can do things like I mentioned, get out in nature, but there's also chugging a glass of water. 9 times out of 10, the cravings are just dehydration. Like your brain is confusing the signals. So that's helpful. Other people that I've worked with will sit with it and gain some information, collect some data. What does this feel like? Where is this coming from? Was there a cue that I didn't recognize? And you just start to realize, like, I'm not going to perish. I'm not going to spontaneously combust. This is okay. It's not a big deal. Cravings tend to pass about 20 to 30 minutes after they begin, but also it's they come and go regardless if you give in to them. That was my other point. Okay.
Right,
So
right.
otherwise, I know people really want to hear, oh, just eat a piece of fruit, or oh, just eat some artificial sweetener, or some kind of substitution. That's fine in the initial week trying to get off these things. But if you use that stepping stone longer than a week, you'll just never get off, and you'll eventually fall back into your original habits of the sugar and the quantity. So
okay, good. That's a good transition to the next question, which is from Denise, because she asked, what are your thoughts about natural sweeteners like stevia, monk fruit, erythritol? And also, what about naturally occurring sugars like honey and dates?
yeah, so again, the artificial sweeteners can be a great stepping stone, but you have to have a plan for these. You have to decide, I'm going to use these for this amount of time. I'm going to use this amount. I'm not going to allow myself to increase that amount, because you will want to do that.
Right.
But also, if you can go without the stepping stone, it's a million times more in your best interest, because what they do is they create worse cravings, not just for the real thing, but for the artificial thing. Because yes, I know there's no cravings, there's no calories in most of these things, but that's not a good thing when it comes down to it with the cravings, because it's telling your brain, is signaling, oh, there's sweetness, there's going to be a bunch of calories flowing in soon, you better get the insulin ready. So it gets that anticipation's built and everything's in place, and the calories never come.
Yeah.
So what does your brain do? Where are the calories? Go get some calories.
Yeah.
I need some calories. So it's a trap. It's just a big trap.
Why, when you look at studies of people using things like aspartame and chemical sweeteners, for weight loss, they actually almost always end up gaining weight using those products, because they end up eating more for exactly those purposes, right? Because they're
right. And
go up.
I'm assuming the people who are asking these questions are very well educated. Otherwise, they wouldn't be watching something like this in the first place, right? And they're also very health conscious. So if you are trying to improve your health, you are not trying to do that by getting on artificial sweeteners, things, or even natural sweeteners, things like the stevia and the monk fruit and the erythritol. These are going to cause endocrine problems. These are going to cause liver problems. There are so many different organs that are impacted by these things that we don't think about. I know we just focus on the sugar and that's the main problem right now, but let's not create another problem by trying to fix that problem.
Yeah, got it.
So when it comes to the naturally occurring sugars, like the honey and the dates, this is another stepping stone. Dates were my stepping stone. But again, you need to have a plan. You need to decide when you're going to get off them and how much.
Because then you just start thinking of all the things you can eat with dates. You're like, oh, I'll make brownies with dates, and I'll put dates in this, and my date paste and date icing. And
yeah, essentially what we're doing is we're still getting that artificial dopamine hit. Yes, dates are natural and they still have the fiber intact, but they're dried. Our ancestors had very little time or opportunity to be laying our fruit out in the sun and hoping the birds and other people don't come by and eat them. It's still creating a concentrated amount of sweetness that our brains do not recognize. So you're still going to get that dopamine hit. You're still going to get those cravings, and it's just a matter of time before you continue on that path back to where you started.
Okay, so then Tina asks, where does whole fruit fit in? Can you have too much fruit? How do you
I
feel
love
about
this question.
fruit?
Whole fruit is fantastic.
Yes, agreed.
Research actually does show that they did the study where up to I believe 10 servings per day was used, and they found the more servings that they ate, the more health benefits that they accrued. So that's one perspective. Because most people in my country, at least, don't get a ton of fruit. So yes, naturally you would see those people's health increasing
Right, because they're getting more fiber, they're getting more nutrients.
Right. But my question is, what are they eating? What are they pushing out instead of that fruit? You know, like where are the vegetables? Where are the grains? Where are the legumes? And you know, if you're eating animal products, that's your prerogative. So it's like you're still missing out on those nutrients. I think the whole idea is to get a balanced, nutritious meal as opposed to focusing too much on one, you know, area. So, but however, there is a caveat because fruit is, like everybody knows, very high glycemic load. So if you are eating a bunch of fruit for a snack, let's say, that can be much more detrimental to trying to get over some kind of sugar problem, or, you know, just in general, if you have metabolic syndrome or difficulties metabolizing your sugar, then you want to think about eating it after a meal. So you already have all the fiber taken in from those initial whole grains and potatoes and vegetables and all those other things that you eat. So there's, again, that natural buffering mechanism. But
right,
in
fruit,
fruit,
eating all by itself.
Right. But in fruit in general, there is plenty of fiber and there's plenty of water and there's all those natural buffering systems right in place. But sometimes certain sensitive individuals need to do a little more. So I do have people that I'm a little nervous to give like the green light to eat as much fruit as you want to.
Okay.
Especially people who have had a sugar addiction or some kind of sweet tooth for a long period of time, because they will sit down with the entire bag of grapes or the whole watermelon or, you know, whatever, with like, oh, they said it was okay. So just know yourself. Again, this comes to having that intuition and knowing what you can and cannot, you know, sort of get away with. And I think we all have a good inclination of what's healthful and what's not when it comes to eating behaviors.
Yeah, good point. Okay, good. So generally speaking, we love fruit. Okay, Laura asks, is it easier or best to stop sugar cold turkey or gradually wean off?
I love this question. Okay, so I'm going to be everybody's worst enemy.
Already nobody likes you here, Karli.
Right. Truth hurts. Okay, so I'll just start by saying that different professionals do have differing points of view because they have different populations that they work with.
Right.
So again, this depends on the individual. All of these responses depend on the individual. There's no one size fits all. However, in my experience working with my clients and from what I have read in the literature and from many of the medical personnel and other individuals that I have worked with throughout the years, it is always best to rip off the Band-Aid. Just get it over with. Because if you don't, more likely than not, those people who try to just little bit at a time dip their toe in, slowly move back to where they started. And nobody wants that. It's incredibly deterring to your to your psyche. So there are, however, I will be honest, there has been a few people that I've worked with that could do the stepping stone approach, and they could, you know, Karli, I just want to take this one step at a time. I don't want to dive in. It's too much. It's too extreme. I feel too deprived. Like that's a lot on your nervous system when you are, the client I'm thinking of was running a business and she's raising 4 children and, you know, trying to deal with the social aspects of eating differently than everybody, but then also getting off all of these sugars. Like it's a lot on our nervous system.
Yeah.
So I completely relate to the people that need more time because I used it. I was a stepping stone person. I wish I hadn't been.
Yeah.
Basically just prolonging your suffering.
Yeah. And also back to the how we started this conversation, you know, you're not going to find a drug or alcohol treatment center that's like, well, we'll just wean you off. Like, we'll just go down to like 8 drinks a day, and then we'll do 4 drinks a day, or just, a little bit of heroin, and then we'll go to half the heroin. Like, that's never the approach. So again, not to be extreme or anything, but like, it is interesting that when you look at other, addiction recovery approaches, it's always cold turkey.
You got that right, sister.
Yeah. Okay. And then this is a good question, I think, from Cynthia, because people ask me this all the time. What are other words to watch out for in ingredients that mean sugar? Because as you touched on earlier, that like, it's hard because sugar's in everything. We think about like ice cream or, candy bars, but I mean, it's in salad dressing and pasta sauce and condiments. And, so when we're reading ingredients, I know there's thousands of them, but like, what are some key ones that people should note, that, because it's not just going to say sugar always, right? So what are some ingredients we need to avoid?
Sure. So this is actually a skill that I teach my clients. It's so important that you become familiar with these terms and you can personally recognize them. So just hearing me rattle off a few might be helpful today, but for you to really solidify this skill, it's important for you to start Googling this from time to time. Or what I find to be most helpful is in the moment. When you're in the store, you're looking at the item, you're trying to decide, is that even a food? And you, the citric acid, what the heck is that? So you Google it and you just make sure, like, what the heck am I putting in my body?
Yeah.
Honestly, I think the best approach is to just stay away from all processed foods, because then I never have to do that.
Right, because what's in it.
But I know that's a lot easier said than done.
Yeah.
So some of the most seemingly innocuous terms I feel are things like corn syrup solids, or just corn syrup, glucose, date sugar, agave nectar, barley malt, brown rice syrup, caramel, honey, fruit juice concentrate. Every kid is drinking fruit juice concentrate, like their parents having no concept of what that is.
And I think people see fruit juice concentrate, they think, oh, it's health, it's fruit.
Right. But there's also maple syrup. A lot of people think, oh, it comes from a tree, very natural. That's just another term for sugar.
Yeah.
But also Florida crystals. I had to look that one up one time. Like that sounds so exotic, and so like it's from Florida. It's got to be good for me.
Florida crystals, like orange juice, oranges. Yeah, oh, that's interesting. I don't know if we have that in Canada.
Yeah, my all-time, I want to say favorite, but it's definitely my least favorite, is natural flavors.
Yes. Oh my gosh, I always tell people, if you see natural flavors, that just means like chemical crap.
Yes, or if you've ever read The Dorito Effect, you'll know that some of those natural flavors legitimately come from the expressed anal glands of beavers. So you will want to look at these more in depth on your own, for sure. So,
but yeah, that's a good point, to Google things. Yeah, just to educate yourself. Everyone has a phone. When you're at the supermarket, you can do it right there in the salad dressing aisle.
Exactly. Yep. Google is a wonderful tool. I mean, it can be and it can't be at the same time. But I would really like to leave your viewers with a list of, people that they can look up or maybe research more in depth, different books that would be helpful to understand, like the dopamine mechanisms. And I just feel like the physiology behind it and the evolution of like where our brain started and what our bodies are used to and how they have evolved to try to deal with our natural environment. It's super fascinating, but it helps you to kind of navigate these problems and make informed decisions instead of just in the moment, like, everybody else is eating this cake, I'm just going to eat it too. So
okay, that would be amazing. Fantastic. Okay, any other final thoughts you have? Anything else you want to say about sugar or getting off sugar?
We've all been there. It took me years to accomplish this. This is not an overnight experience. I understand that, and I wish you all the best. Yeah, amazing. Okay, thanks so much, Karli. I will put the link to your YouTube channel, obviously, in the description below, so people can go find, because you have a great channel. She has so many great videos where she goes really into the science of some of this stuff and just all aspects of health. So you're really going to want to check that out. And are there any other ways that people can find you or work with you? I know you work with people one-on-one. So what's the best way for people to connect with you other than YouTube? Yeah, I can leave. YouTube is a great way.
Yeah.
You can find all the links to all my other, social
Okay.
media from YouTube, but also my website. I can just leave that information with you, and you can put
Yeah,
it.
I'll put all that in the description below so people can find you easily if they want to learn more and work with you in any way. So amazing.
Yeah, I do free consultations for anybody that's interested in working with me one-on-one. So that
Great.
seems to be super helpful for people.
Intro. Okay, fantastic. Awesome, Karli. Well, thanks so much. I hope this little chat was useful for people. I know that sugar is a big topic and it's a little bit scary because a lot of us do feel very addicted to it. And the idea, we kind of know it's not serving us, but we also are terrified to let it go. It's our security blanket. So I hope we gave people some ideas, some thoughts, some suggestions about how they might begin that journey.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks so much for having me.
Awesome. Thank you.